different industries. So yeah, that's.
So you were mentioning about how there weren't any courses online about product, and it was a relatively new field when you first landed your first product job. But nowadays, there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of courses on Udemy, Coursera, and so on. So do you recommend taking any of them to develop your skills in product, or is there anything that needs else that to upskill ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, most of my learning has been on the job. Like you said, 2017, I did several courses whenever I used to study about product management. However, to be asked,
And do you have a personal favorite book that you recommend?
there are several books you could take up. I typically read on psychology and leadership, primarily because it will help you understand user behaviors a lot better and which you can then apply on your job. Of course, also to manage your stakeholders, to manage your team members, because I, I I hope you understand product roles are largely roles which are of the type brokerage, right? Like you are a broker in between multiple departments, in between multiple teams, and you have to very efficiently do your storytelling. You'll have to very efficiently manage expectations between different teams while you're building your vision, you're building solutioning, etc. Right? So you have to interact with multiple teams. Now, there's a lot of people aspect in your role, right? And so you have to understand this, of course, apart from the fact that you have to understand your user basis, right? Who are your users of the product, etc. But there's also a lot of internal things that is going on. So, which is why it's important that you get your grasp on how to get the most out of people around you, right? And some of the books that I think intrigued me a lot were there's this book called Truth by Neer Eyal. This book is about, it tells you which kind of products, which kind of companies have made it large and why they've made it large versus why some of them are failing repeatedly, right? Like why so many of these startups are failing and they're not able to hook the customer as some of the other products are doing, be it social media, be it messaging app, be it news apps, and so on and so forth. But what is that aspect of the product, technologically speaking, that hooks or builds habits in within a given individual? So that book has been quite interesting read. There's this another book called um, Surrounded by Idiots. Now this book is about different personality types and how you communicate with them and how you get through to them. I don't remember the name of the author of the book. And then there's a book called Lean Product Playbook. This book is one of early reads I had. This is more like a blueprint of how the product goals are typically, how to build great products, etc. So this is also interesting read for someone who's just starting out.
That's great, man. And what are a few things that helped you grow in your PM job?
I think two important things, which falls, I think, largely in all kinds of roles, but even more important in product role, is one is empathy. You've got to build empathy, not only, like I said, not only towards your users of the product. You have to understand how different users are interacting with the product and how you can slip into their shoes and see from their point of view a given product, a given problem statement, or given feature, and so on and so forth. But also empathizing towards your stakeholder requirements, right? The ones who are sponsoring your product. Also empathizing towards your tech teams who are developing, your hardcore developers who come from the world which is not very close to user base, right? Or maybe design teams, right? Empathizing towards those support teams that are customer facing with respect to your product, right? So being able to understand and empathize with how they feel about your product, you may not, and actually most definitely not, will be able to build a product that will satisfy everyone's needs. You will likely build a product that is, marginally picking up some of the user needs, but you should know what these gaps are, and you should be able to find a way to address it in future, or you've got a plan to sort of work around, etc. So that is important, and which is why I think this is the core, let's say, a soft skill that one should have to sort of succeed in your role. The second one is communication, right? Again, communication is extremely important in all the roles, wherever you sort of land yourself into. But I cannot emphasize enough how important it is in product role. Going back to my statement of product manager being like a broker between all the teams, you essentially have to communicate, over communicate. I mean, there's no amount of communication that is enough, right? So you constantly tell people what is going on, what are the gaps, what are the risk areas, what is your plan of action, etc. Let's say even before your CMO or CCO is coming and asking you for an update for a product feature which is delayed, you proactively go ahead and tell them, look, this is what has happened. We are anticipating a delay. Let's now prepare yourself for what will be the ripple effect of it. Right. So it's important and critical that you communicate and over communicate, so you can reduce the friction between the teams, right? And there will be a lot of friction because your product release has a lot of other dependencies in other departments, right? And you would want to make sure everything has been covered, and there's no gaps with respect to communication. So communicate in the form of emails, video clippings, meetings, whatnot, like TMO drafts. So you've got to just make sure you're sending it in all channels so that people have their eyes on what you've got to say, right? So yeah, these two are, I think, also have helped me. I've learned them the hard way in my role, but definitely something that will make or break your career within product management.
Thank you, ma'am. And now, since you mentioned that you've been in Africa, in Portugal, and now you're in Dubai, so how's it like working in so many different countries? And is the work, uh, you know, does your work depend on where you're working from, or is it remote?
No, no, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I'm grateful for the opportunities that I had that got me places. And there are a few places that I've been to while I was at Jumia, which I would have never gone otherwise ever in my life, right? So I think when it comes to work, right, especially when we're talking about the impact of you working in a foreign country, right? It's important that you have to sort of shed your preconceived notions about corporate life, corporate culture, and you have to rebuild every time you're in a new country or you're working with people from new country, right? Because they have their own background and context with which they work, and typically understanding cultural differences becomes my first step when I have to change my team, or when I have new manager, or when I have new manager, or when I'm changing location myself. Mostly I would go to, let's say, an expat who's already there in the country and who've experienced the significant part of the culture of a given country, right? And I would start getting their perception and ideas so that I am prepared for set that kind of a setup. You'd be surprised. The first time I went to Nigeria, I was told, um, whenever you're talking to Nigerians, and again, no stereotyping, but this is exactly what I had received back from the person who was there in Nigeria, who spent sufficient time in Nigeria, also an Indian. So this person said, you've got to ask them again, make them repeat what you have said to them until they get the complete gist of what you've you've tried to mention. Because quite often you'll be surprised that they do not, or you're misunderstood, or they do not capture the whole information. So you have to make them repeat what you said, right? Now, these are small, small things, but extremely critical when you understand. And also, and not just this aspect, but also, how sensitive people are. How do you, talk to people? What kind of feedback and how you can present feedback in a public setting or in a one-to-one setting. This is very different from country to country. And, all the people that I've managed across teams, across different countries, this is one stark point which I had to be extremely careful. Otherwise, we would not get the intended reaction or let's say absorption of the information that we're trying to give to them, and then it goes completely in a negative spiral, right? So we have to be completely cognizant of these cultures, etc. And it's been an interesting journey. I've been about I was fortunate enough I think there was a point in 2023 where I was managing people from 9 different countries at the same time. Again, knowing who behaves how, and how they sort of receive feedback, how they put in their work, what is their work-life balance like. So someone in Portugal would just go from 9 to 5. At 4:45, they're already putting their pens down, the laptop's closed, they're ready to go. And that's extremely critical. Whereas somebody who's in Egypt, they would slog all the way. Again, I would not say what is right, what is wrong. I'm not here to make any Narayan Murthy statements, but you have to respect that. You'll have to respect how, what are the context of people who you're working with. So
So the life of a PM seems very fun, and you get to explore a lot of places.
definitely, it's never boring. It's never boring. Even if you're not traveling or if you're on a remote job, you are interacting with people from different places. Even from a point of view that you've got to benchmark what you're building, right? And when you have to benchmark what you're building, you will typically start looking at products across the world that has come up with similar ideas, right? And then you inadvertently you start speaking to their product managers or their user base and try to get their understanding and experience, right? And so you have to get an understanding, globally speaking, how people are reacting to different kinds of products, features that you would want to implement in your geographical location. So you are interacting no matter what, with people from different cultures. So that's going to be part of your job for sure.
Ma'am, we have a lot of talented designers in our audience, and I would like
Mhm.
to ask you, how important is design in the field of product management?
Right. I mean, see, design is so it's not just about functional needs of the product that user cares about, but it's also the enjoyable experience that you're able to get through your product, which is key, right? And that enjoyable experience sort of comes from the design aspect of your product, right? But more than design, what I would say is, you know, it's the design thinking that is critical in product management. It's not the hard skill of you being able to, design. You can do motion graphics, you can do video designing, you can do the different elements, etc. But it's really about the design thinking that is the core aspect of product management. You might as well be just, someone who's taking a pen and pencil and a paper, and you're drawing a wireframe, which is what we call as low fidelity wireframe workouts, right? You could do that and you could present your idea, but it's important that you're able to sort of visualize how your product is going to interact with different people. Now, the aspect about good user-centered design is you're making your design which is usable, right? Which is equitable in the sense that you're preparing a design which applies to different diverse groups of people, of audiences, right? You're making your design in a way that it is enjoyable, and finally, you're making a design which is useful, wherein the set goal or problem statement is actually solved with your product, right? So that is basically your foundation of user experience design. You've got to think in all these directions. Is your product usable? Can they actually go through different steps? The design structure and the purpose of the product is actually met. Equitable. enjoyable, and useful, right? And you use these principles to build the whole flow in your design thinking, right? The design thinking, as it is basically a process which allows you to, I mean, here basically you start with user research, right? So you start with, again, this is a five-step process. You've got empathize, you've got defining the problem statement after you do the empathizing. Empathizing is essentially user research, where you understand your users, you understand the core problems they're facing. So then comes your defining. Defining is defining the problem statement that you want to address in a given scope of time, right? And then comes ideate. Ideate is solutioning, right? You come up with multiple ideas. You zero down on certain ideas, and then you sort of go ahead with specific, let's say, specific idea to sort of go ahead, specific idea to sort of prioritize on, and then you prototype. You build prototypes of your idea, and then you start testing your idea. So you've got testing, and then finally you've got implementation, right? Which is um, development of your idea, even idea if your testing sort of has successfully completed the phase. At every stage, you can iterate and you go back and to different stages to see where did we go wrong because a given stage has not sort of moved forward as you expected. So this is design thinking principle overall. This is what we apply. Design, I'm not talking about really the Photoshop or illustration design here. I'm really talking about how you put your head into bringing out the most user-centered design that will be, well taken by your audience if they plan to create a product, right? So that's basically the design aspect. But if you're more, like you said, there are more designers in the room. I think it's great that you come with design background. Product designers I've seen product designers transitioning into product management sort of roles because they now appreciate or understand the design element pretty easily. Like I said, because your role is sort of a broker role, you have to understand the intricacies of what each of the departments you're working with, how do they work, right? So for example, when you're people do ask me, does a product manager need technical understanding, or do they need to know how to code? They don't, but they still need to understand how tech team does, right? So that you're able to speak their language. Same thing with design, right? You will be interacting with designers day in, day out. So you need to understand and know their language and how they work so that you can, understand what is a good design versus what's a bad design, right? And same thing with business, same thing with DI and so on and so forth. So when you're working with so many teams, you've got to understand how they work and how you can sort of give your inputs in the right way. So yeah, design is critical for you to understand, but it's not mandatory to have like a core design experience.
So having the design skills does help as a PM in some way or the other.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. You sensitize yourself towards, the requirements of the department and how they work, etc. But like I said, user research is extremely critical even within design function. Even a designer needs to know how to do user research, and so does a product manager, and so does your business stakeholder, etc. So this is a good skill set to have if you have already.
And you've been emphasizing on user research. So, how important is customer discovery and user research in product management?
See, in the you are trying to build a product which meets or has the right product market fit, right? So, in order to understand that PMF, right, you absolutely need to understand how your customers, I mean, what kind of problems customers have, right? We sometimes go ahead and solve problems which they might not actually have. Then they end up, we end up delivering those features which are not being used, or being used in an incorrect manner, or being used for some other purpose which is not what you had started out with. So avoid those kind of mishaps, you typically want to do your customer discovery before you begin any kind of development, right? I mean, your stakeholder, your CEO might come to you and say, "Hey, I want a loyalty feature on my product," right? But hey, you've got to understand, why do you need a loyalty feature? Does your user actually want one? And how will that bring the shift in, customer behavior as they start using your product? Does it bring out the right level of retention that you would want with this program, right? So you've got to do your user research, and particularly the way you do your user research is through interviews, through focus groups, through surveys, through field studies. And what you do is you've got two kinds of research. One is primary research, that is the research that you do by yourself, right, where you are interacting firsthand with your end users. Second is secondary research. This is the secondary research is the one that you do first, which is basically you go through different materials online, you go through different articles which is already out there, or you basically, before even starting out thinking about loyalty program, the first thing you will do is go to Google and type loyalty programs in a given space, in a given industry, right? So that's secondary research, and this is what you typically start out with, and then you go and do the primary research, which is you yourself going and doing interviews and getting as much feedback and insights as possible, right? And again, this will amount to both quantitative results, where, for example, if you're sending out surveys, you're able to sort of put down a chart with numbers and figures, or this works, this doesn't work, and so on and so forth by this percentage and stuff like that, right? But you also get qualitative insights. Say, for example, when you have expressed that you want to build specific idea, right? You are able to observe what is the first feeling, first reaction, first emotion the interviewee has expressed, and how that is going to shape, and how you're, able to sort of derive out of those insights is going to be key as well. So those are qualitative output that you can sort of expect out of the research. But it's important always to keep your pulse on customer discovery at all times. And guess what? This is not a one-time exercise before you start the development of feature. This is a continuous exercise. Right? You've got to do your customer discovery and try to keep understanding your PMF, your product market fit, even as you develop and even after you develop. Right? So you to understand at every iteration how your product is shaping and how that is being received by your end users at all points, so that you can quickly come back to the whiteboard and reiterate, and you can fix things which you need to fix, or maybe even scrap the whole idea because you've realized that this is not working at all. You have to think differently in this structure. So that is why it's important that you keep your hands on on every customer interaction, be it analytically. So you typically put Google Analytics, or you put different analytical tool to capture the customer feedback, even without you going to them and asking them feedback. Or you can do your interviews, or you can sit with your customer service teams and understand feedback and problems that they're facing. So there are different channels through which you can sort of understand how customers are feeling about your product as they use it, right? Or why they're not using it, or why specific feature is not being clicked on as much as you had wanted, right? So you're able to sort of understand the bounce rate and this and that. So there's multiple tools out there that help you get that information even without actually having to ask your customer.
Got it, ma'am. And is there an anecdote that you'd like to share in your journey as a PM that you remember? That's something that shaped your career.
Anecdote. Okay. So there've been, I mean, several anecdotes, but I think what I can tell you is we were in, I mean, I just started working with a new team. I had added on a new team called advertising in Jumia. And it was non-existent team, non-existing vertical for Jumia per se. We were getting about 1 billion visits on our e-commerce website across Africa. The company is basically has its portal across 22 countries in Africa, And we started to understand how can we monetize these visits better, right? Now, to build a full-fledged advertising platform would mean at least 3 years roadmap plan with the kind of team that we could typically get, like a team of 7, 8 people, developers and a head of development and so forth. So with a specific budget in mind, we were able to draw out the roadmap for about 3 years to build a full-fledged advertising plan. But we did not have that kind of time because everything has to be done yesterday. The deadlines are always, uh, you know, gone well past, right? So essentially, at that point, I had the challenge of building the team, building a roadmap which is lean enough that can start giving you some revenues even from its phase 1 deployment, right? So you have to sort of build your product in the leanest possible way. So you can, add pieces to it, but as you're adding pieces, you're able to sort of start generating the revenues even from early stage, right? So you have to start planning the product in that way. We did several, again, same thing. We did user research. We spoke to large giants like L'Oreal's and Nike's of the world to understand what point and how can they start investing in Jumia advertising portal. It's very similar to, Google advertising, Facebook advertising, and so forth, but very exclusive to African market, right? So even Google and Facebook do not have their hands on in that continent, in that space. So if somebody were to monetize on that 1 billion visits, it had to be Jumia because they had that kind of exposure, right? So essentially coming up with a solution that is lean enough, quite a lot of manual work, but still able to sort of give you the revenues, right? So in about 3 quarters, we were able to set up something which allowed us to bring in about $11 million revenues just from a very, very half-baked potential work. It did. It was an interesting journey for us. We had to set up a very quick team. We had to move resources from other departments and put them together. We did not have the team, time to hire a new team altogether. So we had to sort of just pull in resources. We had to bring in a lot of stakeholders to sort of, work on this as a highest priority. And we saw the results. We saw quick results. Um, and it was, I mean, successful in the end. I mean, this right now, the team is still building. I've left the organization, but the team is still building the full-fledged platform as we speak, but we are able to clock revenues every quarter already. So that's how you get successful planet.
That's great, man. So maybe now we'll open up for the audience questions. If anyone has anything that they'd like to ask, ma'am, please go ahead. Is there anyone?
Don't be shy to speak out. You can also type it in the message box. Well, I hope you guys are intrigued enough about the product manager role, and hope I've given some clarity that helps you understand what the role is like. But if you have any more questions, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. I can drop it here, and we can have a one-to-one conversation whenever. Happy to do that.
Definitely, ma'am. I see no one's asking any questions. So maybe I have one question that I like to ask you. And now, since we're all in college right now, the thing that we can do to improve our PM skills is probably attend a few, online hackathons or case studies or something of that sort. I've participated in a few of those. And other than that, what do you think we as college students can do to develop our PM skills? Because it's you can't just go out there and do a project. You probably can do a small scale project, but you'll not be able to monitor it properly. So, what do you think we can do as college students to improve our motor skills?
I think this is the phase where you do user research study, right? These are some of the things which you can build as a skill set and and especially also benchmarking. For example, if you're free today, you can just open Spotify and understand what are those key features that are exciting you as a user, and what are those features which is probably not being used enough and why, right? And then you go deeper into it. You will see some of these articles of people prepare like portfolios, right? Where they're going and deep diving on a specific product, on a specific feature, and they're able to sort of understand for who that feature was built, why was it built in the first place, what are the metrics that it can potentially improve, right? Whether it is improving new customer acquisition, or whether it is improving retention rate, whether it is bringing in growth, whether it is bringing in revenues, right? So being able to sort of understand from a PM point of view, or let's say think of it like you're the CEO of the product, right? And why would you have invested certain time to develop that feature instead of doing something else? And what would you have done in those aspects, right? What are the other features that you could have brought if you were the product manager of that product? If you're able to sort of do this exercise consistently for some of the popular platforms, and you will also see a lot of material, people already doing it, right? So there's a lot of material online, and you can then cross reference with some of the material online and see where you stand and how you stand. That is this exercise a will help you sharpen your PM skills. This is quite extensive, exhaustive kind of exercise to do. Second, it'll help you prepare for your interviews whenever you sort of join, right? Because your interviews are typically this. They will not ask you about the product they're developing in their organization, because of course you would not or might not have that kind of clue. But they will ask you about some of your favorite products. They'd ask you about some of your not so favorite features within the most common apps that you're using day to day, like Uber, WhatsApp, so on and so forth. How would you have improved them, etc. So if you do these exercises, you'll be able to sort of, better prepare yourself for those interviews. Except that, like I said, you can work on, some kind of tools that we use on a day-to-day basis. So you can, pick up those courses and just understand and use those platforms extensively. So you know already, even before you land into a job, as to um, how to sort of, for example, how to use Google Analytics, how to use Power BI, how to just write a SQL query, right? So those kind of things, basic but extremely important, and it's a core part of your day-to-day job. So I think that will help you and take it to the next level. The case studies and everything is a bonus point. Like if you're able to sort of participate in external events, it'll help you just validate where you stand. But essentially, these kind of exercise will just help you self-improve on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, ma'am. So, is there anyone else who'd like to ask ma'am a question? All right. So, saying no worry, maybe we can end the session here. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. It was very insightful.
Thanks a lot.
We learned a lot from you, and it was nice having this conversation.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And as said, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to do, any kind of conversations, or even if you want to just thinking to sort of jump into product role, I can sort of help you get to the point where whether or not you want to actually do it eventually. So I understand it's a lot of anticipation time when you guys are in college and you're still exploring what you want to do. So happy to be part of your decision making.
Thank you, ma'am. So that brings us the end to our pick the product series, and we thank every one of you who've stayed with us for these 4 days. Please do follow us on Instagram for more updates, events, and workshops on product. And see you soon next time. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Good night. Bye bye.